Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Primus Tracks. There's a wonderful Facebook page dedicated to Primus Tracks, although it's being taken over by all these ruffians with this team envelope filter. I'm not sure what that is. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. It's also the PayPal address if you are interested in procuring some stickers. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I have the leader of Team Envelope Filter himself here, Frankie.
Hi, Josh. Hello, everyone. Team Envelope Filter.
I would say about 52% of our listeners just got a little serotonin rush from that.
Yes.
Good for them. The numbers are in your favor, Frankie. Of course, we're going to be talking about Pilcher Squad. It's the second track off of the LP Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People, according to the world of Frankie, which I will not dispute. We should start with a little bit of a news flash. Now, we heard a couple of weeks ago, Frankie, that we've got 3 new tunes in the hopper, and there's a possible pre-tour 10-inch vinyl that may accompany those tunes or carry those tunes into our waiting hands.
Yes, and one of these tunes is particularly epic, clocking in on 13 minutes, right?
13 minutes. I can only hope that it's a re-recording of Los Bastardos, but I have a feeling it's not. So we have that coming down in one way or another. I'm really curious to see what form it takes. Les did mention the 10-inch on the Eddie Trunk radio show, and he was talking about a vinyl record. But we also have another recent piece of information that his son Cage is working on a documentary.
I'm wondering when they're going to ask us for our input.
I was just going to say it would be a travesty if you were not involved. I have a feeling that my participation is not at all necessary, but I do think the Primus fandom definitely needs your input when it comes to that documentary. How could they not call you? So,
having access to all the tour props, and the stage costumes and all the recordings in the vault, I think, he has more than enough material to make a really fascinating insight into some behind-the-scenes Primus.
Right, if anybody's the person for the job, it would be somebody like Les's son, who has, 1, the time, and 2, the actual interest to go through all that stuff, because we know Les is not at all interested in that. So,
but now that we're talking about Cage, I just remember that the last year they kicked off this project that was supposed to eventually evolve into a full-length solo album. But after the first painting or the first song dropped, everything went quiet. I wonder if they ditched the idea.
Oh, with the NFTs, yes, that was controversial to say the least as far as the feedback on those social media posts that were promoting it. So, I don't know. Yes, there was supposed to be a series, but you're absolutely right. We have heard nothing since. But we do know there were snippets of music laying around that may end up being a Les Claypool solo album at some point. So, Les always talks about having a lot of pots on the stove and moving them around and bringing one to the front, and it sounds like he's got plenty of things simmering in the background while Primus takes the forefront here for the time being. So it's a great time to be a Primus / Les Claypool fan. There are things happening.
Exciting times.
It is, and I always connect it to the fallow period from 99 or early 2000 until 2003. And then as far as making new music, from about 2004 to, say, 2010, when not a lot was going on. There were some tours, but there wasn't a lot of new music. So as far as Primus goes, I should say, and it always takes me back to those years when I sat alone in my room just wanting Primus to come back. But I haven't had to worry about that for quite some time because we're getting all this great stuff.
There's, the prospect of some Animals tunes coming back to the fold during the next tour. I really hope they take the time to rehearse them and possibly resuscitate at least one or perhaps all of them. It would be absolutely amazing.
Which one would you choose if you could?
Oh, it's such a mystery, right?
I have a 1 in 5 chance of I guess. But it's, absolutely. And of course, I want to credit you with the Frankie effect, as I've mentioned before, for getting that idea into the head of one Les Claypool. So obviously, we don't know if that's absolutely the truth. He probably has heard it from a lot of different people, but we'll take credit here on this podcast. So if you get an Animals tune on the next leg of Tribute to Kings, please scream it's Josh and Frankie at every pause so we can hear them on the bootlegs. Good times.
Oh, yes.
Let's go. That's funny. Let's go ahead and welcome some listeners into the Punch Bowl. You can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and join the Punch Bowl. That's all you have to do. Say whatever you want. If you don't have Apple Podcasts, I understand, because I don't either. But you can leave a 5-star review on Instagram, tag us in that post, or send it to us via DM on Twitter or Instagram. We'll read it right here on this podcast. Frankie, we have 2 today from Apple Podcast. One is from Minimal Just, who titles it Semi-Wondrous Ride Over the Electric Grapevine. Love this deep dive podcast into my favorite band, Josh and Frankie and the true star Soya. He's not wrong. Know their stuff and have amazing guests as well. Every episode is a detailed look at a Primus song with musical and lyrical breakdowns, as well as a highly important live history. Seriously, this podcast has felt very validating in my obsession with this band. There's other freaks who love this weird band. Yep, that's us. We're the weird freaks. Thank you, pal.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.
Absolutely. He's not wrong about Soya, too. And it's funny because this other review mentions him by name as well. This is from, I like this name, this is from Herb the Ginseng Teacher, who titles their review, Perfection is Your Middle Name. I'm loving these references. Awesome podcast. I've been a massive fan of Primus since 1990, and it's such a blast to revisit these albums and tunes with such great conversation. I love the guests as well. Soya is the man. Thank you guys for doing this. I agree, Mr. Ginseng, Mr. or Miss Ginseng Teacher.
Soya is indeed the man.
We'll get him back on here real soon. I just got to wake him up. Oh, Frankie, I would also like to, and I may have already said this before, but I'm going to say this person's name again, and I really want to thank Aaron for Aaron's generous, very generous donation to our server cost and to help us afford to get things like new stickers printed. So, Aaron, you have an anytime pass for Captain Shiner's yacht. What that means is, if you see Frankie at a show, he has to buy you a beer, maybe even a commemorative pin or something of that nature. You know, maybe he'll let you hug him. It worked for me. So, Aaron made a very generous donation, and you can too. Our PayPal email address is primustrackspod@gmail.com. We appreciate all iterations of funding, and it goes a long way to keeping, really, what it does is keep this podcast up in perpetuity. I don't want to do a paywall. I don't want to do a Patreon, mostly because I'm lazy, but I also think that this should be out here for any Primus fan to find over the years, long after we're done, when our voices give out. So thank you all for your support. So Aaron, thank you for your support. Stickers are on the way to some of you as soon as the new design comes in. It's on the way, and I'm very excited to share it on our socials. Frankie, we have some miscellaneous debris to cover as well. I believe you pulled from the archives from Portland, Maine for Carpenter and the Dainty Bride performance. Now I'm going to go...
Yes, with the very interesting jam after the song was done, right?
Yes, and I'm going to play a portion of that again because I had this thought in my head when we played it last week, but I didn't vocalize it. But our pal Matt Hunter did note this on Instagram, that if you listen to once all 3 musicians are in on this, it actually sounds like a part of another track on the Animals recording. So listen closely. If you listen to the bass, it's a little bit muddy with effects, so it might be hard to tell, but once Herb kicks in on the drums there, I heard Rapscallion, the solo portion, that drum and bass lick.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds like the breakdown that they always did for the song live, right?
Yeah. So while Lur's going crazy over the top with a solo, Les and Tim are doing essentially that. It's almost exactly the same thing.
The mystery is why would they play that out of context and out of the blue?
Right. I think Larry was noodling, and then I heard Les come in first with that muddled rapscallion line there behind all the effects, and I think Tim picked up on that quickly, and they went for it. So it was kind of interesting for them to bust that out right after Carpenter. So I would still take it as a track, though, if they want to revisit that and make a whole track from it. Thank you, Matt, for pointing that out. If you have miscellaneous debris, find us on Instagram, email, however.
Thank you, Matt. Much appreciated.
We don't catch everything in the moment. You erstwhile listeners are very helpful. Well, let's talk about today's track, Frankie. It clocks in at a monumental 1 minute and 55 seconds. It is Pilcher's Squad. We have a few things to talk about with this track, even though it's so short. But I'm going to turn it over to you because you have some context for us, especially given the lyrical content.
That's right. So let me share some info about this track with you, Josh. Norman Clement Pilcher, born in 1935, is a former British police officer. He became notorious for the vigor with which he pinned possession of drug charges on pop stars and whom he considered to be hippies, and for the dubious methods employed in his undercover operations, which included paying off informers with drugs. Kind of ironic, right?
Right.
As for the song itself, it was premiered on October 13, 2003 at the Phoenix Theater in Petaluma. The last performance to date took place in Orlando in 2004, with a total count of 18 performances during Fromage and Hallucinogenetics. Curiously enough, out of all the tracks on the album, this song was chosen to have a promotional video, and it features a live performance that was also used to promote the Blame It on the Fish DVD. You can find the video, unfortunately, in very low quality on YouTube. It is worth noting that the song was developed completely spontaneously from a jam session at the studio, and the band subsequently recorded the track in only one day.
Yeah, I remember Les saying that back back around the time of release, that they took care of this basically in an afternoon.
I just have to point out that Norman Pilcher actually passed away almost a year ago, on 14 March 2021. He was aged between 85 and 86.
Right, so he just recently passed within the last year, at least at the time of this recording. Yes. And we do know, through the lyrics, of course, but we do know he did some time for his crimes. And I do want to point out that, of course, in the United States, what we would describe his crime as is obstructing justice. But over in the UK, they have a much more wonderful term for it, especially for my 13-year-old brain, which the charges were included perverting the cause of justice. I actually hear that a lot because my wife and I watch a lot of British crime dramas. So we hear that quite a bit, actually. But the terminology is the only difference there. So he was planting drugs and other things, especially on rock stars. I remember he went after the Stones, a couple guys in the Stones.
Yes, his CV was actually quite impressive. I mean, he went after Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, and two members of the Beatles, George Harrison and John Lennon.
And the whole point, I guess the whole point was he thought that these rock stars were undermining society, I suppose, or he just didn't like them. It's unclear.
Yeah. And it was also good for the press, to try to portray like these efforts from the police to arrest these pop stars that were corrupting the youth.
Oh, right. So, yeah, there's a PR element to it as well. So, Pilcher was playing this game. I mean, he ended up getting burnt. I think he spent, 6 years in prison?
Right.
Yeah. And but he was playing a dangerous game there because even though these pot-smoking hippies may not look smart, they also have a lot of money to afford the best lawyers. And that can go a long way. We should point out the irony of this guy trying to take down two notorious drug users and chain smokers and heavy drinkers in Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, and they outlived Pilcher. That's amazing. So good for those guys. So Pilcher, interesting character. He gets the lyrical treatment here. Let's go ahead and talk about those lyrics, Frankie. There's actually, I think there are more lyrics in this one for a minute 55 than there are in all of The Carpenter and the Dainty Bride, which checks in at 6.5 minutes. There's a couple of things I really like in here. He says he's found a way to make them pay for the deviant things they do and say. I think the word deviant is perfect there, given what we know about Pilcher and his prerogatives. But what I really love is how Les is poking Pilcher in the ribs, too, or at least his character. So he calls him the quick-witted Sergeant Pilcher. I think at one point he says, sharp as a tack, that Pilcher. And there's another one that I think I'm missing. And he's a dutiful man with the task at hand. So he's being very underhanded in his compliments, right? As far as how he labels Pilcher, because the police would show up on the report of drug possession and they'd find nothing. But when Pilcher made his appearance, all of a sudden, there were the drugs. And charges were filed if they could make it happen. I think didn't they say, and this might have been just on the Wikipedia page when I was skimming, Eric Clapton, I think, very narrowly escaped being arrested by Pilcher.
Yes, thanks. He got tipped off.
These lyrics, I do believe, reference a particular moment, and it has to do with George Harrison. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a name drop in one of the verses that Patty Harrison arrived and found Pilcher's squad waiting at the door.
Right, Patty Harrison, first wife of George Harrison, of course.
That's right.
Yes.
What stands out? Well, there are multiple things that stand out in this track for me, Josh. One of them is that we were discussing in previous episodes how Les he has this really incredible talent to deliver these amazing stories, sometimes with very sparse lyrics, or with just a few words. His narratives are very compact, but very compelling. But I think this song is the odd one out because he's really cramming a lot of words in there in a very, very short piece of music. I think this track is pretty unlike the rest of the album, but I think it's also pretty odd in the Primus catalog itself. It's pretty short, not only for Primus, I think for any band, it's a pretty unusual piece of music in the sense that, it kind of starts very abruptly. Yeah. And before you realize it's over, it's a relentless song. Even the solo is compact. Everything about the song is like really frenetic, really in your face. But nothing outstays its welcome. It's just this track, very short track with a lot of words, a very straightforward narrative. But I think it's totally different from what they had been doing up until that point.
Yeah, and I also think it's in the running for, and I don't say this pejoratively, I do think it's in the running for being the most annoying Primus song of all time. And that's okay. It really is. You said it's frenetic. The guitar part is obnoxious. The bass line is kind of weird, even for Claypool standards. Herb's locked into this cool drum groove with the double kick that he really doesn't stray from, I don't think. So
no, not at all.
Yeah. And so, and they do it for just under 2 minutes. So like you said, to me, that's like a sign of maturity that they don't try to take up too much real estate with it. They just said, we have this idea, we're going to get into it and get out.
Yes. And it's worthwhile pointing out that during the live performances, they never deviated a lot from the studio recording. Mm-hmm. The only difference is that the performances usually featured an extended drum intro from Herb. Right. He would play that groove, and it would take a while for Les and Lur to join in. But other than that, the structure was pretty much the same.
Right. Yeah. Looking at the time codes for some of these, they're all around 3 minutes. So they, right. So they don't even double the length of it, but they keep everything nice and compact. And I don't know if that's because it's an instrument change for Larry and or Les, but yeah, Tim starts the drum groove, and he's doing a lot of extra bars on that one. So the other thing I wanted to point out that we don't get on the record, where they do kind of a musical chorus here, but in the live performances, and I think it was on Fromage as well as Hallucinogenetics, we got Tim singing background vocals on that one, right?
Yes.
And he was actually singing in tune. Les was doing his Les thing. I don't know that he was actually singing the notes, but I remember hearing a lot of those soundboards, and Tim was pretty on but he was singing the notes, if I recall correctly. So good on Tim. It was really cool to hear him the first time on one of those soundboards. I went, whoa, who's that? It can't be Larry because he's turned up too high. So it was really cool to get two vocalists on that one, on that chorus.
Sometimes I wonder if Les thought pretty highly about the track, considering they did a video for it. Well, they just took live footage, but they promoted it as a music video, and there was also a promotional CD single released for Pilcher's Squad. So it makes me wonder if Les considered that this was the best track of the bunch to promote the album, or if it comes down, just to the record label saying, you know what, the other 4 tracks are too long. This is the shortest one, so let's make it the single. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to go back. Do you have the Pilcher's promotional single? I've never seen it. I do.
One. Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And I assume it's got artwork from the Animals DVD packaging somewhere on it, that kind of thing?
It's just a CD with Primus and the song title on it, but there's no artwork.
Oh, wow. Okay, so very bare bones. Well, yes. Okay. So to return to your other point in your question, I remember Les saying to us, which is actually fun for me to say, I remember Les saying to us that he thought Pilcher's would be a hit, especially compared to these other tunes. You pointed to it. It is short. They get in and get out. There's a really awesome, basically a 2-bar solo by Larry. It's punctuated by the Go Lur, Thanks Lur, which is really fun. It's just so energetic. So maybe those are the reasons behind those thoughts that it might be a hit or even get them some traction in 2003.
Yes, maybe. Perhaps you had seen a promo with artwork, but that one is called Promo de Fromage.
Yes, that's what I
Yes, and it features all the 5 tracks from Animals plus 10 additional selections. And the artwork features an image of this clay figure that Lance did, of one of the residents of this haunted house that we see in the artwork, which I've always thought is pretty reminiscent of the invaders from the Twilight Zone, if you recall that episode.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. They lifted that imagery 100% and appropriated it. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. Because it is one of those visuals that sticks with you, especially if you're, think these guys were kids in the, 60s and 70s, so they probably saw that Twilight Zone in reruns, and it probably freaked them out, as it did me when I first saw it. We should credit Zoltron and Adam Gates for their layouts and graphic embellishments on the packaging for the promo and for the actual release. It looks great. They really complement the sculptures very well. It's a very impressive release in that regard.
And we discussed for a moment how amazing Lur's solo is.
Get comfortable, everybody, because I'm about to play this solo for you.
Awesome.
That is so genius. And I'm actually going to point to the liner notes, the essay that Adam Gates wrote as part of this release. He says, Lur has the amazing ability to know when not to play as much as when to play, and then in parentheses adds, this is aptly demonstrated by the Go Lur, Thanks Lur, 5-second manic burst in Pilcher Squad, the best guitar solo I've ever heard. And it really is a manic. Me not being a professional guitarist, it does sound like he kind of picked a shape and went with it from a couple of different spots on the fretboard. But I love how he kind of just stumbles into it. It's kind of sloppy, but it's just textbook Lur. It's a beautiful thing. I love it.
All right.
And he does an embellishment live, does he? He just plays it straight.
Yes, he does.
And I appreciate that very much. He's keeping that to fidelity. I would say that little part gives this track some traction for me, and it's repeatable just for that 5 seconds.
I also wonder, if you agree with my perspective that yes, the solo is amazing, and the majority of the track, like you mentioned, the bass line, it's kind of weird. The majority of the track, I'm trying to find the right word to describe it, because I don't think it's out of tune. What I mean is that, it's not very melodic. It just sounds like noise. But then the part where Les sings, he's found a way to make them pay for the deviant things they do and say, that part is pretty melodic. And the change, in the bass is very enjoyable.
Yes. So that contrast of the chromatic notes that they're playing, and they're all over the place, by the way, musically. They're just playing notes. But then when we get into when you get into that sing-song chorus that you mentioned, Frankie, you're absolutely right. They're playing something a little more melodic and going at it that way. And I think they're playing in unison. Larry and Les are there, and it's kind of cool. I actually was kind of screwing around trying to figure it out, and it's also kind of chromatic, but it's much more musical than the other parts that we get. Because Les is doing a lot of hammering on. Larry is doing whatever squelching, squealing, strangling a pelican thing he's doing. I don't know how you even begin to try to figure that out, because he's just the master of effects and weird noises. So that part I wouldn't even try. But the sing-songy part is kind of fun to play and sing. And it's accessible. So I think that's part of the reason, too, going back to the idea that this would catch on as far as radio play goes. So it definitely has that singability factor. And once again, it's over and done with. So as annoying as it is, you're only dealing with it for 2 minutes.
Oddly enough, even though it was supposed to kind of represent the album promotionally, it was not a live certainty. I mean, it was not performed at every single show like Winona was, for instance.
Right. It's really nice that somebody was kind enough to upload that promotional video, because you got to see what was on the balloons at the live shows. And if I recall correctly, it's the just herky-jerky footage of them pulling the ducks around in the desert, right?
Yes. As we know, they never performed all 5 songs during a single night. They would switch them around. So they had the opportunity to recycle that footage for whatever song was necessary.
This is one of them. One of 5. We should say this is a pretty madcap song, in the sense that the video accompaniment, as we just mentioned, is spliced together of these guys running around in those white suits in the desert, pulling some ducks, just acting goofy. It's almost like you could put Keystone Cops footage to this track, right? and have it be successful. But they do something interesting on the introduction right before they get into the first chorus, and I think they kind of just omit or drop half of a beat, because you can count the 1, 2, 3, 4, but then it goes off in this other direction, kind of in the middle of the 4, before the and or something. I haven't tried to count it all the way out because it just unnerves me, but I think you guys will hear what I'm talking about as I play it. Here it comes. He's found a way. Just right there. There's like, he's found a way. They're just like, screw it. We're not going to wait for the next bar. We're just going to go. So it's kind of cool that they do that too. They just, it's as if they're in a hurry this entire song. We got this idea, but we want them to stick around too long. We got to go. I guess those are all the reasons this could have been, in the mind of these guys, a hit. And it's kind of like Year of the Parrot in the sense that, and a couple other tunes that we've talked about, Herb gets into this unusual pattern. He just kind of has to ride with it. He can't find a way out. And I guess in a 2-minute song, you don't really need to find a way out. It's funny because on that video footage of that promo, Frankie, he looks so bored back there just playing the same thing over and over and over again. I thought he would vary it a little bit, but he's just back there for 2 minutes. Oh, 3 minutes, actually. That's why he's so bored, because they lengthen it.
It must have been a nice break for him, though, right? With, all the complex stuff that he had to play night after night during those tours.
Sure, that's about as it's about as close as to a it's about as close to a break as a drummer gets.
I'm guessing whenever he saw Pilcher in the set list, he probably thought, "Oh, cool,
I can take a nap," because we know he can do that in his sleep. So,
how about some live cuts?
Oh, live cuts sounds great, Frankie. It looks like. Oops. All right, our first live cut is from Detroit. State Theater.
Cool show, cool set list. Let's hear what they did with Pilcher.
Oh, State Theater Odd 3. So I saw them in Milwaukee and Chicago, and I was so close to skipping work and going to Detroit, and I didn't go. And there's a couple tracks, this one included, that I missed, and I'm still kicking myself. It was just a job, man. I didn't need it. All right, let's listen to this part of it.
That solo.
There it is, man. And Les has a lot of enjamming there, as you said. He's got to say, thanks, Lur Pilcher. He's just right back into it. He can't even put any emphasis on it. He's just got to go. It's very funny. And there's Lur playing that solo, man. He's got that shape, and it's so goofy. I love that. And I wasn't there. Looks like our next one is, the infamous Davis show, Frankie.
The infamous Davis, yes. I think, that particular issue that Les was wrestling with during the entire night with his voice actually gave the songs a really cool, really creepy vibe. Pilcher, no exception. Check it out by yourselves.
Or with us.
I was really struggling with that one because it's kind of high, but the tone of the instruments is amazing.
The instruments sound great. Les sounds like he's suffering big time.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing he had Herb there to back him up. I heard Herb there on key again, right there on the notes, even though the notes are all over. So that is a good one. Les does sound just awful. He's struggling that night. Poor guy. And that's what makes it a legendary show, I suppose. He braved it. Oh, looks like we have Triple D here because we are now going to Denver.
Oh, yes. This show had a really, really cool tone throughout. That is something really cool about these Fromage and hallucinogenetics shows, that it's really amazing to compare the tone of one night to the next. Not only the performances were unique, also, the whole vibe and the whole sound of each show is unique. Denver is no exception. And let's enjoy a little bit of that Herf drum intro.
It's a fun one to listen to. Probably fun to play. Only 64 more bars before Les comes in. Or Lur. There he is. All right, like the record show that in Denver, it took Les 37 seconds to come in on that track. So Tim's grooving on there. Man, Larry, here's the thing, because Larry's tone on the studio recording is much milder, but he's really, of course, his live tone is so killer on Fromage. And that just makes it sound, that just makes it sound even more obnoxious on this recording. And I just love it so much because he's just hammering that note. Frankie, I am not a professional guitarist, but I'm going to grab my guitar because I think there's something that we should note about the way that Larry is hitting that note. So for the first time ever, I am going to play guitar on Primus Tracks.
This is historic.
It is. And here's the best part. I'm going to play one note. Okay? So Larry's hitting this note, and I think I'm onto something here, okay? I think I've made it a very important scientific discovery. And that is, as Larry's hitting this note... By the way, I'm playing acoustic because I'm not going to go over there and plug in all that crap that's like 20 paces away. So, he's hitting that note, Frankie. Okay? He's hitting those eighth notes, whatever. I think it's very important to know that I really do feel like he is hammering on with his left hand onto that note on the fretboard every time that he's about to strike that note. Because if he just held that on there and was picking it, it's not exactly the same, okay? And if he was muting it, not exactly the same. But I'm going to in a very exaggerated way, I'm going to kind of hammer it on every time I'm about to pick the note. I'm going to fuck it up too. Let me try that again. And I think that's what gives it that extra edge. And that is my PhD thesis on Larry Lalonde's guitar playing. Thank you very much.
That was absolutely amazing, Josh.
I'm going to insert crickets during that pause. Thanks. That was the sound of everybody turning off.
I'm looking forward to hearing more guitar contributions from you.
Well, after all that, Frankie, I guess we should say, Sergeant Pilcher.
You've been tracked.
Oh, he took it from me. Folks, thanks for listening. Short track, short episode, but lots of fun.
Josh, next week we'll be pondering if nothing never lasts forever.
Wow. A philosophical conundrum to end on, Frankie. Everyone, your assignment. 5 pages. Cite your sources. Answer that question. Later days.
Willie Mays.
That cunning Sergeant Pilcher, he's found a way to make them pay for the deviant things they do and say. Pilcher, Sergeant Pilcher, sharp as a tack, that Pilcher. He's a dutiful man with his task at hand, and he's bound to ensure with his master plan the purity of the